Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be taking a look at another viral video coming out of the Ukraine conflict. This is of a Russian T-72 surviving a close attack from a Ukrainian NLAW ambush in Mariupol. Once again, guys, I've screened this video. It doesn't contain any graphic footage, but it's still real combat, real lives at risk. So if you're not comfortable, you should tune away. And I assume this is not your first rodeo with me, but if not, check out the rest of the channel. I have lots of Ukraine video breakdowns, and the earlier videos I explain why you should listen to me and why I think I'm qualified to at least weigh in on this sort of stuff. Okay, having done all that, let's take a look. Oh, this is from War Leaks, by the way. Link, as always, is in the description. You definitely want to check this out. Okay, let's go. Boom. Russian T-72 tank surviving a close-range Ukrainian NLAW attack in Mariupol. One of the Russian tankers also talks about it in an interview later, and they added that. Okay, here we go. So, okay, you know what? This is such a brief video. I'm going to let it play, and then we'll talk. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we just saw. Now, they're going to break it down, and I'm not going to spoil their breakdowns, but I do want to add a little bit of extra context. So, first off, this is a dangerous spot to be a tank, right? Because it is an urban area, and they have no supporting infantry. That's sort of the shock here. Normally, when you have tanks operating in an urban environment, you want to have dismounted infantry in the area doing exactly what the tank can't do. In this case, watching the windows, watching the doors, right? You saw this guy was pretty casual, right? He had a cameraman out. Someone else probably to his right had the NLAW prepped and ready. And after they fired the NLAW, the camera remained on the tank. And they were so tactically unsound, they actually started yelling things. So if there was any dismounted infantry, they would be able to see the NLAW hit, and they would hear a man yelling in the window, right? Which would, of course, enable them to return small arms fire. But no infantry support, so these guys were able to just sit out in the window like they were drying off their, laundry. So, what? Okay, there we go. All right. So they point out correctly that this ambush was initiated after the tank exposed its more sensitive rear armor. So this is pretty common for tanks. Normally you have a designated kill zone. You say when the tank reaches this point, that's when I'm going to initiate my ambush. Again, this is not a complex ambush because it wasn't followed up by small arms fire. It's possible that not in the shot, other tanks might have also taken small arms fire, but it seems sort of unlikely. This seems more like a kill team. So they talk about how this is an NLAW, not an RPG. That looks about right. Yep, the tank got hit on the right side on the back of its turret. Tank survived, was still in the fight. Yep, you can see it looks like, they talk about it later, just the fuel of the NLAW kind of detonated. It didn't actually arm, and it didn't pen the armor, right? This is, for the record, guys, this is extremely, extremely close range fighting. Now, against Russian armor is notorious for actually being sensitive to exactly what this is. They don't have great elevation on their turrets, so they actually can't engage targets that are close and very high up. And you see, even if there was a gunner in this gunner seat, it's not clear the gun would be able to pivot and return fire, right? Anyone who returns fire would have to be a dismounted infantry. Again, in U.S. doctrine, you would absolutely have soldiers who either were moving alongside either side of the road in formation, watching these windows, right? Or you would have them clear this area prior to actually go in and sweep the buildings. Okay, so here is the tank crew. Yep, they entered. So this is what's interesting. This is as they're entering the city, right? My thought was perhaps that this was an area that had been marked as secure, that infantry had cleared it and these tanks were en route to another front, and that's why they were ambushed in their rear area, the rear area of the army, not the rear area of the tank, which they were also ambushed in. But what you have instead, those were the frontline tanks that they were just pushing through. Tanks started to burn, all survived, only minor concussion and small burns. Crew recovered and were given another tank. That's pretty interesting that they have enough operable tanks to get the crew back in one and back in the fight. But here's the nice thing, that we were told the old tank was still working but damaged. So while this was not a tank kill, it appears to have still achieved at least some level of effect, right? It took a tank out of the fight and forced the crew into Russia to roll out another tank, another fresh tank into the fight. So while this is not necessarily the catastrophic kill people were hoping for, this is still taking a tank out of the fight potentially for weeks or months, because you have to remember Russia needs not just it needs to get this tank back in the fight. It probably needs spare parts, and sometimes even a small damage to the right part, for example, say a small actuator in the turret or something, right? You could cripple a tank, and without a spare part, that tank could just sit in a depot somewhere, not in the fight. Functionally, it's as good as killed, even though it barely even took any real damage. We had that happen actually with a vehicle when we were in Afghanistan. It needed a random like timing belt or fan belt, and it took us over a year to get the fan belt. That vehicle never rolled off that forward operating base even once, despite the fact that it hadn't really taken any damage other than just routine use. And so it's just a testament to the fact that it doesn't take much to damage a military vehicle. It takes a lot to kill the vehicle and its crew and take it out of the fight instantaneously, but sometimes even just having to force those vehicles to run pretty rough and hard can be enough to damage and delay a mechanized army. Yeah, they got briefed on the tank's quirks, and they get a day off and are going back into the fight. That sounds like it sucks. Yep, so they talk about how the NLAW, we talk about how this is an extremely close ambush, and it's not an accident, right? What you don't want is to be ambushing the tank in a position where it can fight you. But the problem is this NLAW is a big explosive, and it can easily send shrapnel kicking back at you. So they designed it to have a 20-meter range. That's, 120 feet? So it's pretty close. So these guys actually were probably pretty close to the range. I'm still just in awe that there's zero support from this tank, that they can fire this round, and that they have zero fear, the Ukrainians, zero fear that they will receive return fire, and that this is the invasion of the city, right? Yep, they probably didn't quite hit the minimum arming range, pulled the trigger a little early, and it says only the fuel of the missile went off. I think that's probably exactly the case, right? But again, you almost think if they had fired from a third or fourth story window, they may have actually had more success. But, you have to work with the terrain that you have. And yeah, it can be tough. If you don't know the exact arming range of an NLAW, you can absolutely run into that sort of situation. So anyway, guys, I hope you got to understand a little bit about what you're looking at here, about when people talk about the Russian army's questionable tactical choices. That is what we're talking. This is exactly what we're talking about. I mean, this is something that I can't even conceive. I can conceive of a U.S. armored vehicle being shot at by an RPG, 100%. I cannot conceive of neither the vehicle itself returning fire, a friendly vehicle to the front or rear not returning fire, and dismounted infantry not getting in the engagement, getting in the fight. This is bizarre and sort of bananas. So anyway, If you have other viral videos you want me to check out, let me know down below. And oh, thanks to our Patreon members. Patreon members get access to some exclusive content. And thanks to our Lieutenant tier patrons, Cole Foster, Command Unit, Caffeinated, Jakob Flavius, Chris, Dr. Shadowcop, Porterworld, Time, Brandon Armitage, Telruin, and Astro Hunter. You guys make this content possible. Okay, thanks a lot. I'll see you guys in the next one.